9. William Hudson. In late 2015, Hannah Johnson and her boyfriend, Thomas Camp, took a family camping trip on some land they had recently bought in Tennessee County, Texas. They were joined by Thomas's 2 adult sons, Nathan and Austin, Hannah's parents, Carl and Cynthia, and her 6-year-old son, Cade. Little did they know, the previous landowner, William Hudson, was angry that they had purchased the property, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to get his revenge. Hannah and her parents stayed behind at the campsite while the 4 other campers went to get some firewood. Hudson shot and killed them all, then tossed their bodies into a pond in his yard. He then went to the campsite where he fatally shot Hannah, then shot Carl and beat them to death. Hannah's mother, Cynthia, hid behind some chairs until dawn and then sought help. She was the only survivor. Cynthia testified in court that she could hear Carl asking Hudson why he was hurting them and saying that he thought they were friends. She heard the 2 fighting inside the camper, then watched terrified as Hudson came outside, vomited, and went near her hiding spot, making her think that she would be his next victim. Instead, he sat down and drank a beer, then went back inside and finished murdering Carl. Cynthia said that Hudson had been unpleasant but helpful toward the family during a previous encounter when they got their truck and camper stuck in the mud. He had also volunteered to help the first 4 victims collect firewood the night he murdered them. When the group that stayed behind heard gunfire, they assumed the men were just having fun. Little did they know Hudson was headed their way next. A jury found Hudson guilty of 3 counts of capital murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. 8. A decades-old double murder. David Schultes and his fiancée, Ellen Matthews, were shot dead while camping in Silver Cliff, Wisconsin during the summer of 1976. The killer shot David in the neck before sexually assaulting Ellen and firing 2 bullets into the woman's chest. Sadly, the case went cold and remained unsolved for decades, while police did their best to try figuring out who murdered the young couple. During the 1990s, investigators uploaded DNA evidence recovered from the scene to a law enforcement database called the Combined DNA Index System, or CODES. Unfortunately, no matches turned up. In 2018, detectives revisited the case using a groundbreaking technique known as genetic genealogy, which involves identifying suspects through any DNA that their relatives have voluntarily submitted to a genealogy database. This enabled investigators to narrow down their pool of suspects to 4 brothers, whom they watched until they saw an opportunity to secretly collect DNA samples from. Raymond van Nieuwenhoven was the 3rd brother that the police visited. They pretended that they were doing a survey, which they then asked him to fill out and place in a sealed envelope. The 82-year-old saliva turned out to be a genetic match to the killer. He was arrested in 2019, nearly 43 years after the murders. Van Nieuwenhoven maintained his innocence, but as far as the jury was concerned, DNA doesn't lie. He was convicted of killing David and Ellen and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. 7. A fatal family gathering. Nobody expected the night to end in bloodshed when Miles Jones accompanied his girlfriend to a family retreat at a Bucks County campground in 2019. But things quickly turned deadly when the couple got into an argument. The irate boyfriend was found trying to flip over his tent with his girlfriend inside while she screamed for help. He reportedly warned other partygoers that nobody was safe and that they were all going to pay. 41-year-old Eric Braxton and 46-year-old Arthur Hill intervened in an attempt to calm things down, but Jones decided to take the altercation to the next level. He pulled out a gun and fatally shot both men. Deputy District Attorney Edward Luca described the horrifying crime as two senseless killings that didn't have to happen and were completely unjustified. The defendant's attorney argued that Jones acted in self-defense after being beaten by other guests. He claimed that he was terrified for his life and had no way to get home from the unfamiliar place he was in, but his defense wasn't convincing enough to get him off the hook for his crimes. Jones was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 13 counts of reckless endangerment, carrying an unlicensed firearm, and possession of a crime instrument. Prosecutors originally sought the death penalty, but a judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms. 6. Ryan O'Carroll. In 2018, a 25-year-old entrepreneur named Ryan O'Carroll decided to camp at Tahiti County Park in Cornwall, England. But the trip was over before it really even began, and it ended in the worst imaginable way. While setting up his tent, a tree came crashing down and crushed the young man to death in what can only be described as a tragic freak accident. He was securing the hammock-like shelter between 2 trees and put too much strain on one of them as he tightened the strap. Ryan's wife and brother were there to witness the disturbing tragedy. Horrified onlookers said that the tree looked a bit rotten, but it didn't look like it was going to fall. The accident happened during an especially dry season, leaving the tree without enough moisture and possibly dead. Natalie Jupp, who was nearby when the tree fell, told the Daily Mail that the severity of what happened needed to be highlighted, presumably to raise awareness about the potential dangers of camping in the type of tent that Ryan was using. 5. Lake BODOM murders. Back in 1960, 4 Finnish teenagers decided to go camping outside of the capital of Helsinki along Lake BODOM. The group consisted of 2 15-year-old girls named Mela Bjorklund and Anja Maki, and 2 18-year-old men named Seppo Boisman and Niels Gustafsson. During the early hours of the morning, an unknown assailant bludgeoned and stabbed both girls and Boisman to death while they slept in their tent. Gustafsson was also attacked, but lived. He was found outside the tent with stab wounds and broken facial bones. The lone survivor told police that he saw someone dressed all in black, with bright red eyes. A group of boys reported seeing a blonde male near the collapsed tent during the early morning hours. The murder weapons were never found, and the killer's identity remains a mystery to this day. Numerous items were missing, including the keys to the victims' motorcycles, which were left at the site. Gustafsson's shoes were found partially hidden more than 1,600 feet from the tent. Unfortunately, police failed to properly preserve the crime scene, and the evidence was disturbed. While it's hard to say whether they would have solved the crime if they had been more careful, a more organized investigation may have revealed important details about the massacre that went unnoticed. Police arrested Gustafsson in 2004 on suspicion of the murders, but he was not found guilty. There are a few other suspects, but not enough evidence to charge anyone. 4. Sarah Cullen. Police in Conifer, Colorado responded to a report of a shooting late last year and found a man dead inside a camper. The suspect, 36-year-old Sarah Ann Cullen, fled the scene in a pickup truck in the middle of the night, but police were quick to catch up with her. They charged her with first-degree murder, menacing, and for having a weapon in her possession as a previous offender. Cullen indeed had numerous run-ins with the law before that night, with a criminal record dating back to 2003. In 2006, she was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, menacing and firing a gun while drunk in Colorado Springs. She was convicted on 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and served a 6-year prison sentence. Then in 2014, a judge sentenced Cullen to 2 years of probation for felony menacing. But she couldn't seem to follow the rules and ended up spending 90 days in jail after having her probation revoked. She spent another 60 days in jail in 2017 for assault and resisting arrest. If Colin is convicted of the charges she currently faces, she will likely receive her longest prison sentence yet. 3. Russell Hill and Carol Clay. 74-year-old Russell Hill was an experienced outdoorsman, so it was odd when he and his 73-year-old girlfriend, Carol Clay, never returned from a camping trip in Australia's Victorian Alps in 2020. Other campers found Hill's vehicle at the couple's burned-out campsite, but the pair were nowhere to be found. The investigation has been slow going, but police revealed late last year that they had found a crime scene and were hopeful that the missing couple's remains would turn up. It was around the same time that police arrested a 55-year-old pilot named Greg Lynn at a remote campsite. By then, the suspect had sold his trailer, which detectives believe could hold important clues about the victims' fates. After more than 20 months of investigating, police found charred human remains that they believe belonged to Hill and Clay. They're currently awaiting DNA testing results to confirm the identities of the deceased. It appears as though the killer burned the couple's bodies and then dumped them into a densely wooded area. Detectives are withholding a lot of the details about what else they found as the investigation continues. If convicted of the murders, Lynn could spend the rest of his life in prison. 2. Maria Madrid. Maria Madrid was a 38-year-old mother who had migrated to the U.S. from Mexico when she was in her mid-20s. She settled down in Colorado with her husband, Eliseo, and had a son. As they prepared to go home after a picnic along the Colorado River in 2005, a man from a neighboring campsite accused them of not picking up their garbage. He pulled out a handgun and began shooting at their vehicle as Eliseo tried driving away. Maria died in the attack. A few days later, a concerned onlooker notified the Eagle County Sheriff's Office about a suspicious-looking man they had seen walking along the river, who matched the description of the suspect in Maria's murder. Deputies arrested 55-year-old Charles Anthony Gross, who was living in a camper attached to his truck at the time. Maria had told her husband that the man gave her a bad feeling shortly before she was killed. The unemployed construction worker, who blamed immigrants for stealing his job, allegedly admitted to killing the woman in a fit of rage. A jury convicted Gross of murder in 2007, and he was sentenced to life plus 100 years. He's challenged his case numerous times and was even granted a new trial in 2010, but the charges stuck. Gross tried to get another new trial in 2017, claiming that his lawyers misrepresented him, but he remains behind bars for now. 1. The Cowden family murders. Richard and Belinda Cowden vanished over Labor Day weekend in 1974 along with their kids, David and Melissa, during a family camping trip in Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. The father and son were the last family members to be seen when they went to a general store to buy milk around 9 o'clock in the morning on September 1st. When the Cowdens failed to arrive at Belinda's mother's home for dinner later that day, she went to their campsite to see if everything was okay. All their belongings were there, but the family was nowhere to be found. Belinda's mother panicked and went to the police, but because there were no outward signs of violence, they held off on starting an investigation until the next day. The following morning, the family's dog showed up at the general store. The Cowdens' disappearance sparked one of the largest search efforts in the state's history, as the baffling case made national headlines. 7 months later, a pair of gold prospectors found their remains roughly 7 miles from the campsite. Belinda and David had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and Melissa died from severe head trauma. Richard's cause of death is unknown, but detectives believe that he died at the site along with his family. No murder weapon was ever found. Serial rapist and murderer Dwayne Lee Little remains a top suspect to this day. but he was never charged in the Cowden family's deaths. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about camping trips gone wrong, let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.